Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Friday's PMI webinar. We're delighted to have you with us. My name is Rich Seddon, and I'm manning the Q&A desk today. Please keep me busy. The Q&A button can be found in your control panel, and we'll be using it throughout the presentation. And I'll put your questions to Marie-Clare as we proceed through the webinar. Today's webinar is being recorded and also broadcast live on Facebook. We will send you a link early next week to the recording once we have it. That will include both the audio and the slides, so don't worry about capturing any of it during the session. We'll send a link to you with all of that afterwards. Finally, from me, before we get underway, I'd like to draw your attention to the schedule. I'm very pleased to say yesterday we published the September schedule for the PMI Friday webinars. It's worth me mentioning for those who haven't joined us before, the schedule and the topics for the schedule is made up of the feedback we receive from participants from the webinars. So we've been running these for several months now, and the topics have been formulated over that time, directly from feedback from people who participated. So on that note, after the session, we'll be sending you a short voice of the customer survey. We really would be very grateful if you could fill that in for us. And you'll find the final question on there is around topics you'd like to see in future. So we're already underway getting October schedule. Terrifyingly, it's only August, but we're already underway with October schedule. So please do take the time. We'd be most grateful to hear from you. And it's the only way we can improve, by hearing directly from you. So again, my name's Rich. I'll be on the Q&A desk this afternoon. And without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Marie-Clare.
Thank you very much, Rich. Hello everyone, and a warm welcome. Thank you for joining me for this webinar, and I trust things are well for you in whatever part of the world you are joining from. My name is Marie-Clare Pedersen, and I'm a senior consultant with PMI. During this session, I'm aiming to share with you some of the insights and learning from my work, highlighting the importance of knowing what value is, how you go about identifying waste, and ultimately creating the space to be able to focus on the value add. So what does your day look like? How much of it is spent adding value? At the end of the day, to what degree do you feel accomplished or indeed frustrated? What is it that gives you that sense of satisfaction or frustration? Have you, like me, ever thought to yourself, why am I doing this? Surely there's a better, easier way of doing something. I don't have time to do everything I want to or need to do. This is having to be redone because it wasn't right first time. What is it that I've actually achieved today? The Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu stated that doing nothing is better than being busy doing nothing. Now, he could have been suggesting here that it's better to do nothing than to expand energy or consume resources, producing something that is of no value. This, of course, to an observer is contradictory. Doing nothing appears a waste, whilst doing stuff appears productive. The question has to be, what are we doing, for who, and why? We will always fill our bandwidth, but what is the activity that is actually adding value? Taking the time to deeply analyse what we do, identify what adds value, and look at ways to improve how we use our capacity will lead to better outcomes for our customers, our organisations, wider stakeholder groups, and ourselves. It's not a matter of doing the same thing again tomorrow and hoping for a different outcome. Most of what we do is waste. A generally held belief is that for processes that have not been analysed or improved, less than 5% of the activity adds value. This is a shocking statistic that means that in a 7.5-hour working day, only 22.5 minutes are of value added activity. But how is this? It's not like we're sitting around doing nothing. In comparison, Toyota quotes a ratio of somewhere between 30 to 60%, depending on the value stream. But this hasn't happened by accident. It's through process design. Many suggest that a percentage of greater than 70% is the target we should be seeking to be truly competitive and considered world class. Analysing what we do and making improvements is something we do subconsciously in our personal lives. For example, finding the most efficient and effective way to get ready for work in the mornings, either so we can fit more in, like going for a run, or for some, squeezing those extra few minutes in bed. But this natural approach is less common in our business environments, and I'm going to explain how we can accomplish this throughout this session. Many of you will have seen this graphic in our content and during our previous webinars, and it is central to answering the question how we create space to focus on the value add. Value is defined by the customer and delivered through the effective, efficient and flexible design of business systems. Value should flow through the value stream, which is at the heart of the business system, pulled by the customer with continuous efforts by the system to improve the system in pursuit of perfection. Value add is defined by the customer. Therefore, if you do not know who your customer is, or have not taken the time to explore with them what it is they value, you're not in a position to identify the activities in your business system that add value. Everything in the business system should be purposed and aligned to delivering what the customer values in the most efficient, effective and flexible way. If not, non-value added activity arises. Building on the content covered in my previous webinar, Understanding Customer and Stakeholder Requirements, in today's business environments, it is even more important to be considering how we deliver customer value in a flexible but consistent manner. Question, Rich.
Hi, MC. We've got a first question on the desk from Kelly. The question is around your experience of how common it is to find the clear expression of the customer value in your professional work with clients.
It varies very significantly, actually. And often what you find is a variation within organisations, so quite significant variation within organisations. Maybe at the top level with the strategic leadership teams, they have a clear picture of what that is. But the translation of that down through the business to those that are actually working, if you like to say, on the front line in the work, often that is lost in translation. They know they are doing stuff and they believe they're doing the right things, but what that means in terms of value to the customer, that's often lost in the translation.
Okay, and just a clarification from me on your answer there, MC. You said within, you mean within individual companies and between companies, I think.
Absolutely, yes, yes.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, MC.
So how do we define this concept of customer value then? There have been many attempts to define value, but this one by Stephen Convey captures this idea of customer perceived value. He defines value add and non-value add, being value add an activity one which contributes to the customer's perceived value of our product or service, and the non-value add being something that if we eliminated would not detract from the customer's perceived value of that product or service. His article, Eliminating Unproductive Activities and Processes, was actually published in the Management Accounting magazine back in 1991. Womack and Jones later defined non-value added activity in relation to the absorption of resources. And this is something we're going to look a little bit more closely around, this idea of resource and capacity connected to value. Do you know the true cost to serve your customers? Customers are demanding more for less, quicker, but at the same or better quality. Quality is now an expected characteristic. Even basic or entry-level products and services are expected to deliver the customer's expected level of quality. How is the non-value added activity accounted for in your businesses? Do you have a cost of sales for each of your products or services that is truly reflective of the effort involved in servicing your customers' requirements? Do you know which of your products and services is the most costly? The likely answer is probably to some degree, but not in detail unless you have undertaken some sort of value stream analysis or activity-based costing activity. This leads us to a significant challenge in managing and reducing costs in our businesses. So let's consider the 10% year-on-year cost reduction challenge, either imposed by customers, which was common practice in the automotive sector when I was working in Tier 1, or imposed internally by businesses, but it doesn't achieve the desired outcome because we often lack understanding, a disconnect, and sub-optimization within our business system as a result. So if we take year 1, we have full functionality, performance is sustained. The red bar is indicating the amount of non-value added activity we're doing, the green being the value added. In year 2, the system is often distorted. People start to work longer hours that aren't recorded anywhere, so it appears the same amount of work can be accomplished with reduced capacity. Mistakes start to creep in, and we end up with reduced functionality, flexibility, and that sustainment of performance is difficult. By the time we get to year 3, the system is no longer sustainable. We've sub-optimized and potentially introduced internal competition into our business. Processes become more variable and our customers' experiences become inconsistent. Our employee morale is also suffering. The challenge with this traditional approach is that it usually results in a negative impact on quality, availability, delivery, lead times. There is a reduction in the available capacity because resources removed, but no effort is made to remove those activities that incur cost but add no value. The proportion of value add to non-value add does not change. Therefore, we need a better way to address this challenge. By approaching the cost challenge from a system and process thinking perspective, so in this illustration now, each column represents a process within that business system. We're still accomplishing a 10% year-on-year cost reduction, but without losing the capacity. We're increasing the value add proportion as well as creating capacity where needed. Year 2 is the most challenging as the likelihood is you're operating at full capacity. The goal is to make the first headspace by removing the non-value added waste in that process. Now you have the space to focus on the value add. Year 3 onwards becomes the relentless pursuit of perfection on the first process that we look to improve, and then systematically working to remove the non-value added waste from each process. And when you think you're done, you do it again and again and again. Rich.
Hey MC, perfectly timed. Anyone would think I'd heard this before. So we've got another question in on the desk. The question is about where to start. And I think some of this is going to be, you're going to explain later in the webinar. But the essential question is, how do you know where to start when viewing the organization in this way?
That's a great question. Ideally, you would start by understanding your business system as a whole. So what are all the processes that make up your business? Understanding then which are those core processes that are primarily in place to deliver the value to your customer. If those processes are broken, then you're going to be in quite a challenging situation. So that would really be my first place to start. the likelihood is that those processes probably aren't that bad because your business is in operation. So therefore, it's then looking at the support and enabling processes. What is it that's getting in the way? So if we look at the core processes, the processes that deliver the product and the service, looking around those processes to see, well, what is it that is stopping us from doing the best work that we can do? So, for example, if there is a challenge with the supply of materials into a site, then we need to start looking at the processes related to the purchasing of materials, the supply of materials, the receipt of materials, things like that.
Okay, cheers. Thanks, MC. Thanks for the question, Keith.
Great question. Thank you. So if value is defined by the customer and only makes up a proportion of the work we do, what takes up the rest of the time? Well, the requirements of the end customers should always be at the heart of our organisation's goals and targets. Everything we do should be aligned to delivering that end customer requirement. However, we will also have requirements from the business, regulators, other interested parties that we have to satisfy in terms of a constraint, if you like, or a must-have in order to be able to deliver those requirements to the customer. Therefore, we can actually split up this idea of value add, non-value add into three elements. The necessary non-value add, so the yellow column, is often the most challenging to address, as the work does not directly contribute to the customer's perceived value of our product or service, but without that activity, we cannot deliver the product or service. So it is not a simple matter of removing the activity. However, there is often significant amount of waste within those activities, introduced as a result possibly of the poor definition of the intent or of the requirement that is needed to satisfy it. And I've come across this a lot with regulatory compliance and what it is that actually needs to happen to be compliant, and a lack of detailed understanding or being able to have that requirement translated effectively for the business to be able to deliver that efficiently.
MC, I've got a question in from Carol, which is one of clarification. Carol's question, thanks Carol, is we speak about the customer. Could/does this include the internal and external customers?
That's a great question. So when we're looking at our business system, when we're talking about customer here and value add, we're thinking about the external customer. Who is the customer who effectively is paying the bill, bringing the money into our business? When we're thinking about our internal customers, they may well sit in that necessary non-value add element. So it's part of the piece of work that needs to happen up front is a real clear clarification of who are all the stakeholders involved in this and how do we classify them. But yeah, in this context, we're talking about our customer being the external customer to the business.
Thanks, MC. Thanks for the question, Clara.
So therefore, how do we create this space to be able to focus on the value add? So taking this concept of those three aspects of value add, necessary non-value add, and non-value add, if our efforts focus on maximising the value add, minimising the necessary non-value add, and eliminating the non-value add, we have a framework by which we can continuously look to improve our processes to reduce waste, to reduce cost, and be able to serve our customers better. So once we've understood value and truly understood the voice of the customer, our external voice of the customer, and understanding what that customer values, we can systematically work through our processes and activities to identify which of them contribute to adding the value. All other activities should then be identified as either being non-value added or necessary non-value added. In process improvement, we often refer to the removal of waste from our work. The term waste is derived from the Japanese term muda, which translates as irrelevant. Toyota defined muda as one of the 3 types of deviation from the optimal allocation of resources. This deviation from optimal allocation results in the inability for us to maximize the use of our capacity. Therefore, our aim in our improvement activities is to reduce waste, to remove those activities that are irrelevant to our customer and our business, therefore increasing capacity by freeing it up. Waste can be categorized into 8 types, each waste consuming resource without adding value. But remember, you're considering the activities from the perspective of the customer, and to do an effective waste analysis on the work, you need to have insight as to what makes for a good customer experience. If I take air travel, for example, I know this is something that not many of us are doing right now, but traveling by air to get to another destination for one passenger would be considered transport waste, for example, if you're traveling for business, potentially. But for another customer, it may be of value because it adds to their overall customer experience of going on holiday. So we have to be considering waste from the perspective of our customer. When considering the waste question, we should also be asking these.
Sorry to interrupt your flow.
No,
just relevant to the previous slide, I thought we'd get this question in before you progress. Apologies. There's a question come in around the different models, and someone has very astutely spotted that this is downtime, and the acronym for the tool. So the question is would you recommend downtime over other models?
Yes, there are a number of different models or acronyms for the wastes. So originally we started off with 7, then we've gone to 8. Some people add in a 9th. The method by which you refer to it is probably less important than actually being able to identify those wastes. The acronym, whether it be downtime, Tim Woods, and there's a number of others as well, they are really helpful for helping you just to remember that there are 8 and which ones they are. So in terms of one over the other, I find downtime works quite well because it makes that relationship to downtime being potential waste, and therefore making that connection. But yeah, what if you've come across others and they work for you? Absolutely, it's a mechanism to help you remember what those wastes are.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that.
So yeah, so when we're considering wastes, we should be asking these 4 questions. What's the impact to our customer? What is the impact on capacity? What does that waste cost? And what might be the predicted benefit in either capacity or cost and impact on customer experience as a result of addressing that waste? So taking, for example, transport waste, the cost of sending an email halfway around the world is very different to sending a part, but they would both be considered transport waste. So again, not only do we need to consider waste in the context of the customer experience and customer value, but also specifically in the context of the process that we're looking at. So our method, PMI's method for systematically looking at how we improve on the proportion of value-added activity is called the 5 R's. Remove, reduce, replace, reorder, redeploy. The key to effective waste removal through this analysis is to consider firstly what is being done, and then to consider the how, when, where and who. Remember, we're considering the impact on the customer of waste and capacity to deliver that value. This analysis is about generating theories on what could be done to reduce the non-value added or the necessary non-value added activity in our work. Once the theories are generated, then we can look to test to see which gives us the best overall outcome. If you cannot address a whole process step, then if we break that step into its sub-activities, then we can again apply the 5R analysis at that lower level. The first 3 steps focus on creating capacity. Reorder might not necessarily increase capacity, but it focuses efforts on cost avoidance by minimizing the risk from failure, excessive motion, over-processing, rework, and therefore indirectly has that impact on capacity. Again, redeployment won't necessarily increase capacity, but focuses the efforts on ensuring that capacity is effectively utilised by matching the demand to the resource and the competencies required of that resource to deliver the customer requirements, giving us effective utilisation. This resource again could be human or it could be machine. So for example, triaging in a hospital environment, ensuring that patients are directed and seen by the most appropriately skilled members of the team. Automated phone systems, again, making sure that the customer is directed to the most appropriate team. So sticking with my air travel example, there's a huge amount of work happening within the industry to find ways to encourage people back. Customer requirements have changed, new regulatory requirements have been introduced, so the system, the business system, needs to be adapted to meet these new challenges. One key challenge is that of maintaining distance between passengers throughout the entire process. Much work has already been done to reduce queuing and wait times at the airport, which by nature of that improvement has reduced the risk of having too many people being in the same location at the same time. So solutions like online check-in means that actually we have redeployed that process to the customer that can be done away from the actual airport itself. Having electronic boarding cards, we've replaced the need to print off boarding cards, have that paper, and therefore, again, a more efficient and effective method for that process step. Automated passport control, we've redeployed that activity away from a human resource to an automated machine-based resource. So generating the theories for improvement is a creative process. We need to consider who will be involved, what idea generation techniques we can use to support the activity, ensure that the team have a set of ground rules to work to. And we're generating ideas here. We don't want to limit the creativity. We want to make sure that everybody participates. And only after we've captured the ideas are we in a situation to test them. So at this point, no idea is a bad idea. So 2 things to keep in mind, 2 questions that I would continue to encourage you to ask yourself. How does this activity, how does this task add value for the customer or for the business if it needs to be a necessary activity? And what would happen if we did X? What would happen if we did Y? Coming up with lots and lots of possibilities to address the non-value added activity in the process. Only once we have these theories and these ideas for improvement are we in a position to then start to test them What was our prediction? What is the measure that we're going to use to be able to see if that change is an improvement? Setting up and running a pilot test or a simulation to see what happens if we make that change. Studying the result against the prediction. What did it give us? Did it give us what we expected? Did it give us something different? Where is that disconfirming evidence around the prediction that we made? Then drawing a conclusion. How do we take this learning forwards? Did it achieve what we were trying to accomplish? In which case, how do we then adopt it as part of our new standard? If it didn't quite meet what we were trying to accomplish, how do we adapt it and revise the theory? And if it didn't achieve what we were trying to do, how do we abandon that and then seek to test the other theories that we developed? One of the most effective ways of visualizing the value-added activity in our processes and the waste that is included in them is through value stream mapping. So many of you will be familiar with the value stream mapping as a way of visualizing this. And the current state map, analyzed to identify the wastes, serves as a great baseline for the performance of the process from the perspective of the customer. The 8 wastes can effectively be visualized using the value stream map. The future state map provides the goal of what an optimized process could look like if all the non-value added activity is eliminated and the necessary non-value added activity is minimized. We can then use the 5R analysis to provide the creative platform to generate the theories on how to achieve this future state. Where does digitisation and automation fit? Well, digitisation and automation is the use of digital technologies to create improved business processes. So again, directly linked to this idea of improving the customer experience by creating more efficient and effective processes. The use of digitisation and automation is best placed to support creating additional capacity or ensuring human resources are being used as effectively as possible. These approaches are potential solutions to reduce the waste of non-value added activity that cannot be removed from our processes. And they do this in 2 ways, either by replacing, so being able to provide a process or an activity doing something differently to deliver the customer value, or by redeploying, if we're mimicking what the human resource was doing by bringing in things like robotics. For maximum benefit, these solutions should be considered once the 8 waste and 5R analysis has been conducted. I've already mentioned a couple of examples with the automated process control checks at airports. For further information, please take the opportunity to review Rich Seddon's webinar on digital process transformation. But one word of caution that I would like to impart to you is avoid the temptation to digitize or automate a broken process. Do the analysis first, look at how you remove the wastes, and then use digitization, automation to provide real significant value to your processes.
Hi, MC. Thank you very much for the plug of my webinar there. Much appreciated. So question on digitisation from Kelly. The question is, sorry, I've just flicked off the screen. There we go. Kelly's question is, what tools are most useful, and can value stream mapping be used to identify opportunities for digitisation?
Absolutely, absolutely. So again, it's the creative process, and you need to include people with the knowledge of what is the art of the possible. Certainly starting with the value stream mapping as your framework can allow you to start to build various pictures, various different concepts of what a future state could look like. And then starting, and what I find, it tends to be an iterative process, because as something starts to become apparent, more questions get asked, and it's all, well, what if we did this, and what if we did that, and actually what's the impact of doing this in a different way? One of the things I think it's becoming more apparent and people are more conscious of is, how will our customers perceive and interact with a more digital type solution? The current climate is actually providing a platform for challenging a lot of probably strongly held beliefs about what can and can't be done through digitisation and automation. So yeah, but it's worth absolutely keeping your customer in mind as to where they are in terms of their level of acceptance.
And I think your previous slide here with the model of making the customer experience in combination with the efficiency and the effectiveness is the key, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, MC.
So here are my summary reflections. A value-added activity is one which contributes to the customer's perceived value of the product or service. The customer and our external customer is the one that determines the value add. This value add may well change as our customer requirements change. Therefore, we need to proactively seek out this insight, and only then are we in a position to be able to remove the waste from the work that we do. We need to tirelessly work to remove the things that get in the way of delivering value to our customers. This will enable us to be competitive now and in the future. Embrace technology, but remember, don't automate your broken processes.
Thanks, MC. So I've got a bunch of questions. I'm going to start punchy here. This one, Sophie, thank you, I think, for this question. Value stream mapping, where do you start?
So the simple answer is with the customer. So your value stream mapping is always from the perspective of the customer. So we tend to build our value stream maps from right to left. Mm-hmm. So starting with, so what is it the customer receives? Talking to them about what it is that they value in that, and then working backwards to see how we deliver that value.
Brilliant, thank you for that. That was a very concise answer to a big question. Thanks, Sophie. So another point, MC, which is on the point of capacity that you've discussed throughout the webinar. You've talked about releasing capacity across the board and using the various tools. I think the question is oriented and could be assisted with some caveats and explanation around what you mean by capacity in the context of if you do want it and you don't want the capacity released. What are your thoughts on that?
So what we've been discussing here is that ability to be able to answer the question which sort of been floating around for a number of years now, the ability to do more with less. So how are you able to service more of your customers with the same resource? So that's one of the perspectives on it, is being able to increase the volume that comes through your organizations, through your businesses, using the same amount of resource that you have. It also allows the business to be considering from a strategic perspective how it might use that capacity going forwards. So moving into new technologies, new sectors, new customer groups, and therefore expanding the business, Or it may also allow them to think about how they better structure the use of that capacity. One of the things that is used a lot within organisations is this idea of temporary labour. Not only is that a cost, but actually my experience is it is highly variable in terms of being able to develop that intrinsic motivation and quality when you've got quite a high turnover of individuals coming through your organisation. It's not that they don't want to do a good job, but then how are they there long enough to be able to provide that quality, that value and insight that maybe we do that. So again, creating the capacity is the first question. What you do with that then becomes a question of the business strategy and the strategic and the leadership team's decisions as to what direction to take that in.
And certainly I'd advocate that with the comment on temporary labour at the moment. It's certainly on a lot of our clients' agendas. So just a final question on capacity also, which is what tools would you recommend for determining the right capacity without introducing more waste in itself? Great question.
That's a really good question.
But I guess you could reframe that actually, rather than what tools, what's the risk of the tools, I think.
Yeah. So yes, often what I experience is it happening the other way round. So it's like, this is the capacity we have, this is the resource that we have, what are we going to do with it, how much can we do with it, as opposed to thinking from a customer's perspective and a design perspective in thinking, so what is the most efficient and effective design of our process to deliver the value, and then how do we then resource that. There are some other tools out there. One of the ones I haven't mentioned is around work balancing. There's quite a nice way of being able to break down all of the activity that a resource might be doing, and then look at how that is categorized and systematically work to either reduce that or using the 5 R's again, or redeploy that. But actually getting to the point of being able to quantify how much of our resource time is taken up with value add and the non-value add, and being able to then have a real strong baseline for and business case for making improvement.
Okay, fantastic. So we've got time for one final question, which is on outsourcing of core processes. So particularly relevant to a lot of the topics that you've mentioned. So how do you ensure outsourced core processes do not transition with non-value added included?
Yes, this is something we're seeing a lot of in more recent times, and not just the core processes, a lot of the support and enabling processes as well. And I think for me, the key is keeping the entire business system picture in mind. So even if you're outsourcing your processes, how do they sit within your system? So I showed the system map. Where do they sit within that? What are the crossovers? What's the supplier customer, so the internal supplier, internal customer relationship within that? So coming back to one of the other questions about internal customer requirements, absolutely, if you're outsourcing, you become the external customer. Therefore, how are your requirements taken into account to ensure that the work that the outsourcing company is doing is adding value?
And it's interesting looking at the final bullet point that's on screen at the moment, MC. You could swap the first part of that sentence saying, do not outsource broken processes, I think is the message we'd certainly seek to convey.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great observation. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay, fantastic. MC, would you mind progressing to the final slide for me?
Absolutely.
Great. So, ladies and gents, I'm sorry, thank you very much for your questions. I'm sorry we haven't been able to get to them all today. Much appreciated. We will attempt to come back to you where we can. So that brings to a close today's webinar. I'd like to draw your attention to next week, very relevant to today's topic, is around out-of-the-box thinking, so creative thinking. which links very well to creating space and focusing on the value add. So these are some of the creative thinking methods to do so. Yeah, you'll find the full schedule there. Again, a reminder about the Voice of the Customer survey. We'd be really grateful if you could fill that in. And in the meantime, thank you very much from Marie-Clare and myself. Have a safe and relaxing weekend.
Thank you very much, everybody.